My name is Kinsley. I'm 36 years old, mother to an 8-year-old daughter, and the founder of Lumora, a post-surgical patient monitoring system currently used in over 40 hospitals across the U.S. But that day, as I stepped into the grand wedding hall of my younger sister after 12 years of being erased from the family, no one recognized me. They looked at me like I was some distinguished guest, not the eldest daughter who'd once been thrown out of the house with nothing but a suitcase and the words, "If you're not willing to sacrifice, don't come back." And when the MC took the mic to introduce me, everything exploded in seconds. Have you ever been treated like you didn't exist by your own family? Walked into a place called home and realized no one even remembered your name? If you know what that feels like, leave a comment, tap like, subscribe to this channel, because the story I'm about to tell is one none of them ever dared to face again. I still remember the day I stood in the middle of our living room, cold sweat running down my back, gripping the acceptance letter from New York Institute of Technology, the only school that offered me a full scholarship after I spent 3 months writing and refining my proposal for a patient monitoring software. My mom sat at the kitchen table, slowly stirring her coffee, eyes fixed on my dad. He stood by the window, back turned to me, and his voice was cold as ice. "You know this family's counting on you, right?" he said without turning around. "The pharmacy's short-staffed. Your mom can't handle the flu season on her own. And you running off again." I stepped closer, laying the acceptance letter on the table. "I'm not running away. This is a real chance. One of the best schools in the country. I can develop the healthcare software I told you about last year." Mom cut me off. "Software? Don't kid yourself, Kinsley. We run a pharmacy, not a tech company. You could be helping, not chasing fantasies." "I'm not abandoning you. But I won't abandon myself either," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I can study and still come back to help." Dad turned around, his face red, eyes sharp enough to pierce right through me. "If you step on that plane, don't ever come back." I went silent. No tears, no shouting, just the sound of something breaking quietly inside. I looked at Mom, hoping for a flicker of sympathy, a nod. But she only looked down at her coffee spoon. "We've invested everything in you," she whispered. "You're selfish, Kinsley. Your sister needs to go to school. She doesn't have a scholarship. You can make it on your own. You're the big sister. You have to give way." "What do you mean?" I asked. Dad pulled out a sheet of paper from the drawer and threw it onto the table. "Your college fund's been transferred to Madison. She's starting a pharmacy program this year. At least she understands family." I stared in shock. That money was from Grandma and Grandpa. I've been top of my class since grade school. I've never asked you for a single dollar. And now? "Don't play the victim," Mom snapped, her voice colder than the air. "If you won't help, just go. But don't come back crying." No one saw me off the next morning. I packed my things into an old green suitcase, slung it over my shoulder, walked nearly 3 blocks to the bus stop, and took a ride to the airport. I had a pair of worn-out sneakers, an old laptop I'd bought by selling most of my art supplies, and one thing left intact: faith that if I just kept moving forward, something would be waiting at the end of the road. But New York doesn't make space for the weak. I crashed on a friend's sofa from a tech forum for the first 3 months. Worked mornings at a Brooklyn cafe, squeezed in classes around noon, then took a receptionist shift at a small clinic in the evenings. I ate instant noodles so often the smell of boiling water made me nauseous. Once, I collapsed from exhaustion in the library and woke up to a security guard shaking my shoulder. I sent my mom an email, just 2 lines: "I'm alive. I'm still in school." No reply. During that time, I learned something painful. No one came looking. No texts. No calls. No one asked if I was alive. Old friends whispered, "Heard Kinsley dropped out, went MA from depression." I checked Madison's Facebook and saw her sunbathing at the beach, tagging herself at fancy restaurants, using the credit card under my name that I never had a chance to cancel. I realized they didn't just want me gone. They wanted me erased. Sitting in a tiny rented room, stealing Wi-Fi from the neighbor, I built a new online identity. Changed every password. Promised myself never to ask them for anything again. I started coding the first lines of the patient recovery tracking software. Each keystroke was a reminder: no one's behind me. It's just me and the road ahead. I taught myself how to apply for microinvestment grants. Pitched ideas at community startup competitions. Got rejected over 20 times. But then at a small medical tech event in Queens, I met Noah, a young resident who stood watching me present with hand-drawn slides. He didn't laugh like the others. He asked, "Do you have a working model?" When I said it was all on paper, he said, "I've got a hospital wing. If you need real data, I'll figure something out." And he did. We started working together. No one expected a young doctor and a woman with no medical degree to design the first working prototype for post-surgical patient tracking used by 2 small hospitals. But it worked. It saved lives. It attracted funding. 3 years later, Lumora was officially licensed. 5 years in, I became the youngest CEO under 30 to win the Northeast Healthcare Innovation Award. And exactly 12 years after I was cast out of my home, I received a wedding invitation. Hand-delivered, no name on the envelope, just one line. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Madison Tyler." I almost tore it up. But Ella, my daughter, caught sight of the envelope and asked, "You have a sister, Mom? How come I've never met her?" I didn't answer. But something stirred inside me, not rage, not bitterness, but a quiet need to close a door. So that Ella would understand her mother was once left behind. But she didn't fall. She rose. She built. And now she could face the one who pushed her off that cliff, without trembling. I once thought I'd never tell this story again. Those dark months when I truly believed no one remembered I existed. But maybe that's exactly why it needs to be told. Because when a woman is forced to start from zero, the only thing left is not trust in others, but the will to survive, hour by hour, breath by breath, in absolute silence. I rented a beat-up silver Toyota from a guy in my night tech class. We agreed on weekly payments as long as I kept the tank full. That car became my home for nearly 9 months. I folded the back seat, laid out a thin blanket, used my backpack as a pillow and an old textbook as an armrest. On cold nights, I'd run the engine for a few minutes, hand ready on the window switch to wipe away the fog. On noisy nights, I'd wear headphones and play fake ocean sounds on my old phone. By day, I worked the morning shift at a cafe on 8th Avenue from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. Ate a sandwich on the go, then did receptionist work at a private ER near Queens from noon until 8 p.m. After that, I took the subway down to South Brooklyn to do a short night shift at a health insurance call center from 9:30 until midnight. I squeezed in online classes during weekends and brief breaks, often while hiding in the hospital bathroom or sitting alone in a dark staff room. I always carried a worn-out notebook, not out of nostalgia but because it held my hand-drawn system models for patient flow tracking. I documented everything I noticed in the ER. Wait times too long, chart errors, nurses forgetting to update vitals. I didn't blame them. I just saw clearly. The system was broken and people were drowning in the rush. One night, while I was at the front desk flipping through my sketches, a calm yet assertive voice interrupted me. "Who drew this transfer model?" I looked up. A young man in a white coat, tired face but eyes blazing with clarity, stood pointing at the diagram I doodled in the margins. "This bottleneck here. Why did you place the data hub between the 2 exam areas?" I hesitated. Because patient flow data shows the biggest delay comes from nurses having to fill out paper forms. If real-time data could sync between the areas, they wouldn't need to walk across the hallway anymore. I just observed. He stared at me for a few seconds, then a faint smile crossed his face. "I'm Noah, resident physician. I think we need to talk more." We started meeting during rare breaks. He asked questions, I answered. He brought documents, I analyzed. I had never met anyone who took faint pencil sketches so seriously. And no one had ever brought me coffee at 2 in the morning and said, "I think you're building something hospitals actually need." I didn't trust him right away. How could I? But then after I got kicked out of a parking garage for sleeping in my car, Noah sent me a message: "Crash at my place for a few days. Couches long. Just friends." We stayed in his small apartment for nearly 6 months. He let me use his printer to print design drafts. I taught him how to use Excel and AutoCAD to build the prototype. Slowly, between late-night coffee cups and small group brainstorming sessions, the idea for Lumora was born. We named it Lumora because I once told him, if patients know they're being monitored at night, they'll sleep better. Lumora was the light in the dark. It started as a simple app to measure heart rate and trigger alerts when abnormalities occurred. Then we developed an algorithm to detect potential post-op complications using real-time data. We tested it at 3 private clinics, then expanded to 2 regional hospitals. No one thought 2 inexperienced kids could convince a hospital board. But no one knew how to speak in medical terms. I knew how to back up our work with numbers. We weren't good at networking, but we worked until 2 in the morning every day, and most importantly, we weren't afraid to be wrong. I still remember our first meeting with investors. One of them asked, "Where did you go to school?" I replied, "I started at a community college in the Bronx. Took night classes. But I've logged over 3,000 hours of direct fieldwork in emergency settings. And our trial data shows my system reduces 30-day readmission rates by 27%. What other school would you like me to attend?" They laughed. Then they invested. In our 3rd year, Lumora received FDA approval as a Level 2 patient monitoring platform. In the 4th year, a major hospital in Dallas piloted it across their entire post-op care wing. In year 5, we were honored at the National Healthcare Conference. Noah proposed to me with a simple silver ring and the words, "Marry me, so I'll finally have a legal excuse to argue with you about the budget." By year 7, Lumora was in more than 40 hospitals nationwide. I turned down an offer to be the chief technology officer at a large medical corporation. I had come too far to go back to being a cog in the old system. I wanted to build something truly new, something I once wished my parents believed in. I had a spacious office overlooking the Hudson River. A team of engineers who called me boss. An 8-year-old daughter who proudly told people her mom fixes machines that save people. And a good man who always placed a hand on my shoulder whenever I felt unsure, just like the first time I walked into his tiny apartment holding a pack of dry ramen and eyes that didn't dare believe in the future. I made it this far. Not because someone lifted me up, but because I didn't stop when everyone turned their backs. What I didn't expect, though, was that just when everything finally felt settled, I'd receive a wedding invitation from the very person who once used my name to climb the ladder of success. And I wasn't going with fear. I was going with a silence heavier than any round of applause. I received the letter on a spring morning, while sitting at the desk in my reading room, finalizing the last formatting tweaks on a report for a partner in California. Sunlight filtered through the large window, reflecting off the clear glass and filling the room with a gentle glow. Everything was peaceful, tidy, and punctual, like the life I had built brick by brick. Until Meredith, my assistant, walked in with a stack of new mail. I flipped through the usual envelopes: conference ads, keynote invites, a few contracts. But one envelope stood out: pale ivory, slightly textured paper, and neat, slanted handwriting like someone had taken great care. No logo, no return address, just one line: "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Madison Tyler." I stopped. My heart skipped a beat. No guest name, no, "The Collins family warmly invites you," not a single line that acknowledged who I was. But the address was correct. My private residence, clearly no mistake. Whoever sent it knew exactly who I was, where I lived. And they didn't send it because they truly wanted me there. They sent it to remind me that they still had access to what I thought was in the past. I set the letter aside. Didn't touch it for the rest of the day. But in my mind, it played on repeat like a ticking clock in an otherwise quiet room. Madison Tyler. Wedding. No mention of me. No recognition. That evening, as I was making tea in the kitchen, Ella, my daughter, ran in holding the wedding invite. She beamed, her curly blonde hair bouncing as she waved the envelope. "Mom, you got mail." "Who's Madison? I think I've heard that name before." I froze. I should have put the card somewhere safer. But it was too late. I poured the tea and sat down, trying to smile. "She's someone I used to know." Ella frowned slightly, then, like a memory had sparked something, she asked softly, "Did you used to have a sister?" I paused. The question was light as breath, but it carried the weight of an entire hidden chapter. I looked into my daughter's eyes, bright, steady, the same eyes I had protected for 8 years from every shadow I once lived through. I nodded. "Yes. I used to." Ella tilted her head, tracing circles on the table with her finger. "How come I've never met her?" I hesitated, searching for the right words to explain without hurting her. "Because some people, we can't keep in our lives even if they were once family." She stayed quiet as if thinking it through. Then said softly, "But if she invited you to her wedding, maybe she still remembers you?" I smiled faintly, but inside something clenched. "Not exactly, sweetheart. Sometimes people send invitations, not because they want to see you, but because they want you to see something. Ella placed her small hand on mine. If it were me, I'd want to see you again. No matter how far you went. I turned away, pretending to check the sink, but my eyes had started to blur. That night I barely slept. I took out the letter again and I opened it carefully. The invitation was printed on thick paper, decorated in white and soft green, with a laurel wreath encircling the names, Madison Tyler. No mention of family. No sign that I was part of it. But the detail that struck me most was the handwritten line in the bottom corner. To those who were once an important part. I stared at that line like I could peel back the paper and see the real intent underneath. Was it Madison? My mother? Someone else who once cut me off at the roots? I closed my eyes. And in that moment I saw myself at 19 standing in the August rain, shirt clinging to my back, dragging a worn-out suitcase, no one to send me off, no one to call me back. Just the sound of a door slamming shut behind me, cold and final. I opened my eyes and looked toward Ella's room. She was curled up under her blanket, her hair spilling across her forehead. I walked in, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, kissed her softly and returned to my desk. I picked up a pen and scribbled a few lines in the corner of the invitation. I'll come. Not because of the invite, but because of the words that were never said. The next morning I told Meredith, cancel my speaking event in Chicago next weekend. I've got personal business. Book a flight to Charleston. She looked up, surprised. Is this trip important? I just smiled. Important to the past. Meredith nodded without asking further. After all these years working beside me, she knew I never did anything without a reason. I picked a simple black dress, elegant, understated, but enough to hold my ground in a room full of strangers. I brought Ella and Noah with me not to showcase happiness, but because I wanted my daughter to know that even if you've been rejected, you can still build something whole from the ruins. 3 days later we landed at Charleston Airport. The city still held that timeless charm I used to admire in geography books as a child, but I wasn't in the mood to appreciate the scenery. The car pulled up to Evergreen Resort, the wedding venue, just as the sun was setting. Fiery orange light reflected off the tall glass windows, casting the silhouettes of the three of us as we stepped out of the black SUV. I looked up at the stone steps leading to the main hall, where I knew I would face faces that once pretended I didn't exist. But behind me stood Noah and Ella, and in my hand was a promise I had made to myself. I didn't come to be acknowledged. I came to close a chapter, not with anger, not with tears, but with the quiet presence of someone who no longer needed to be erased. The ballroom at Evergreen Resort was everything I expected, grand, luxurious, and utterly unfamiliar. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting shimmering light like shattered stars. A soft piano melody filled the room. The carpet was so thick it muffled every step. I walked with Noah and Ella. Her small hand gripped mine, sensing the tension crawling through every inch of my body. It's just a party, Mom, Ella whispered, glancing up at me. Emma's birthday had more people than this. I leaned down, kissed her forehead and smiled. Yes, just a party. Then we stepped through the large glass doors into the main hall. The energy shifted instantly. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Curious glances quickly sharpened. A few eyes blinked in surprise. Quick side glances. Small nods as if confirming what they were seeing. I wasn't dressed to impress. Just a minimalist black silk dress with a subtle V neckline, hugging my frame neatly. I didn't need to stand out. My very presence, the reappearance of someone long presumed gone, was enough to stir the room. An older man with silver hair walked up to the MC and whispered something in his ear. The MC glanced at us, visibly puzzled, then nodded. I knew exactly what was coming. Ladies and gentlemen, he spoke into the microphone, his voice smooth and professional. Please join me in welcoming a very special guest, CEO of Lumora Health Dr. Kinsley Harper. I didn't speak. I simply stood tall, eyes locked on the central stage where Madison stood next to the groom, Tyler. Madison turned just as the spotlight caught my face. She froze. The champagne flute in her hand trembled. I saw her fingers shake. Tyler turned to look at his bride, then at me, eyes narrowing with suspicion. My parents, seated a few tables away, visibly shifted. My mother leaned over, whispering something sharply to my father. He straightened immediately, his eyes hardening like someone jolted from a dream. And then something no one expected happened. A group of 3 people in hospital uniforms approached me. One of them, a brunette with her hair in a bun, beamed brightly. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her eyes lit up. "Are you Dr. Harper? I attended your talk at the National Health Conference in Chicago last year." "She's incredible," she turned to the man beside her. "We still use her quotes in our staff training." The man nodded enthusiastically. "Lumora helped us cut post-op complications by nearly 30%. Our hospital's negotiating to bring the system in next quarter." I smiled and shook their hands. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for trusting our platform." A simple response, but enough to hit Madison like a gut punch. Then a voice from the left banquet table rang out, clear and unavoidable. "Wait, Madison." An older man in a gray suit turned to her, squinting. "Is your sister Kinsley Harper? I remember she gave that outstanding talk at the Boston conference on medical data analytics." Madison blinked, caught in the spotlight. Yes, she's my sister. We haven't really stayed in touch. It's been a while." She tried to smile, but her voice wavered. "That's unfortunate. Family, you know. You should have mentioned it earlier." "She's quite the figure in our field," someone else chimed in. My mother rushed over, her voice sharp like a hiss. "You need to control this, Madison. Don't let her steal the spotlight." "I didn't do anything, Mom," Madison replied, clearly flustered. I didn't move toward them. I remained still in the center of the ballroom with Noah and Ella by my side. My daughter still held my hand, but her eyes were fixed on the stage where the bride, my never-mentioned sister, was now the center of a growing storm of unanswered questions. Tyler, the groom, sensed something was off. He leaned toward Madison and whispered, "You never told me you had a sister." "I thought she left." Madison bit her lip. I could see the glitter in her eyes, panic creeping into every blink, every stiff movement. "Don't worry about it. It's nothing. Just the past," she stammered. But no one believed that anymore. Another man stepped up to me. "I'm the deputy director at Stanford University Hospital. Are you really the CEO of Lumora? We're reviewing your system for a pilot in our inpatient surgical wing." "That's correct," I said, eyes still on Madison. "I co-founded and currently lead all development teams. We'd be honored to collaborate." My mother nearly yanked Madison back a step. "Don't let her push you out of the spotlight. You're the bride, remember?" "No. Madison's voice cracked, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She was never good at holding composure when things slipped out of her control. Whispers rippled across the room like waves hitting a shore. "They're sisters." Why didn't she say anything? What happened to their family? I didn't need to speak. The truth had already begun to slip through the cracks of the illusion they built over 12 years. I didn't have to explain. My silence made them face what they couldn't deny. I looked at Noah, still standing beside me, his gaze calm but firm. He didn't need to speak. He knew, this wasn't just another night. This was the moment I reclaimed myself. Not with words, not with rage, but with the steady presence of a woman who learned to exist without her family's approval. And Madison, my sister, stood there, surrounded by wedding flowers and soft golden lights, beginning to realize that today was no longer hers alone. I didn't have to walk closer to hear what was happening between Madison and Tyler. Their body language said it all. Tyler's hand pulling slightly away from her back, his gaze tightening, each motion colder, more guarded. Madison's blinking quickened, her voice clearly shaking, her responses rushed and strained. They stood just feet from me beside the elaborate wedding cake. White floral wreaths and fragrant candles couldn't mask the tension pulsing like a live wire. "You told me your sister dropped out in her freshman year, lost her way and disappeared," Tyler said quietly but firmly, each word like a nail. "That you were the one carrying the family legacy." Madison bit her lip. I just didn't think she would actually come." "You didn't think she'd show up? So if she didn't, your lie would stay safe forever." I turned to Ella and bent down. "Do you want to step outside for some fresh air?" Ella nodded. "I want to see the lake behind the garden." I gently took her hand and led her through the side door. But I stayed close enough to still hear Tyler's voice, rising behind me. "You told me you studied at Stanford. But your sister's the one with the credentials. You couldn't even answer basic medical questions. You claimed to run the clinic, but no one in the healthcare community has heard your name. So what exactly have you been doing, Madison? Madison's voice began to crack. I just did what my parents told me. I didn't think you cared about degrees. I was afraid that if I told the truth, you wouldn't marry you? Tyler cut in coldly. You lied from the very foundation. So what part of this relationship is even real, Madison? I paused before stepping all the way outside. I could see my mother a short distance away, hands clenched tightly. My father turned away, pulling out his phone like he was searching for a way out of the moment. Anne Madison, my sister, the bride of the evening, stood alone, being questioned by her own groom in front of the very people who once saw her as the Collins family's golden girl. I heard the soft clink of a wine glass being set down, then the scrape of a chair. I'll ask you one last time, Tyler said, his voice low but sharp. Your degree. Is it real? Madison stayed silent for a few seconds, then lowered her head. No. I never went to college. The room fell chillingly silent. Even the music from the live band seemed to stumble for a beat. Tyler took half a step back. Then why make up all of it? Because I had to take over, Madison blurted. They told me I was Kinsley's replacement. When she left, they didn't want to lose face. They said as long as I followed the script, everything would work out. Mom said I was easier to control than she was. I stood still, a shiver running down my spine. Not because I was shocked, but because Madison had finally said out loud what I had long feared was true. I lifted Ella onto a stone bench by the lake and gently brushed away the dust from the seat. Can you wait here for Mommy just a little bit? I'll be right back. Ella nodded. Are you sad, Mommy? I looked into those clear eyes, my heart softening. No, sweetheart. I just feel lighter. I walked back into the reception hall just as Tyler was walking away from Madison. He didn't look at anyone, just strode quietly across the banquet hall and out the front doors. Madison stood still, not chasing after him, her arms limp by her sides, the white of her wedding dress glowing starkly against a room full of silent onlookers. My mother rushed toward her daughter, trying to fix her hair like that simple gesture could somehow undo the entire disaster. Calm down, darling. Everything will blow over. Just say it was a misunderstanding. Madison pushed her hand away, a rare moment of resistance. No one believes anything anymore, Mom. I saw something in Madison's eyes that wasn't pride or envy, but emptiness. As if her entire identity had just collapsed and she no longer knew who she was. A guest stood up and cleared his throat. We'll excuse ourselves. Seems like the family could use a bit of privacy. Another voice followed. Sorry to say this, but what happened tonight is deeply troubling. I walked over to Noah, who had been watching everything with calm but alert eyes. He tilted his head toward me and asked quietly, You okay? I nodded. Clearer than ever. I looked around the room. The same people who used to be friends of our family were now eyeing Madison with cautious disbelief. Some doctors were leaving their tables, some executives pretending they had phone calls to make, all trying to exit the awkwardness. My mother tried to hold on to a few guests with small talk from the past, but her words no longer reached anyone. Eyes began to turn toward me, not with hostility, but with recognition. They were finally seeing me. After all these years, they saw I was never just the shadow of my family. And Madison, the bride of the day, was no longer the center. She was now just a character in a story everyone thought they knew, until I walked in. I got a call from Tyler at exactly 2:13 a.m. The warm amber light in my office was still on because I had just finished drafting a report for the West Coast Regional Board. Noah and Ella were both asleep. The house was quiet, as if the whole world had paused its daytime noise. When the screen lit up with the name Tyler M., I hesitated. I hadn't saved his number, but my smart contact system still recognized it. I picked up the phone, waited a few seconds, then tapped accept. Hello. Tyler's voice didn't sound like his usual confident tone. It was hoarse, low, and there was something almost weary in it. Sorry for calling this late. I didn't know who else to reach out to. I sat up straighter, set my pen down. What's going on? It's about Madison's family. About their clinic. I found some things. I thought, you should know. I stayed quiet. Tyler swallowed, then began speaking slowly, deliberately, like every word had been weighed. After that wedding day, I didn't go back. I needed time to reassess everything, especially some old financial documents Madison had given me when we were preparing to invest in a healthcare project in Florida. I was planning to use some of my private equity to support part of the technology, and since it involved Lumora, I started combing through all the related files. I furrowed my brows slightly. Go on. There are a few bank accounts in Madison's name, but they're indirectly linked to her parents' clinic. Some Medicare payments show signs of being funneled elsewhere. My audit team double-checked and found over a dozen claims signed under the name Kish, and the email address matches an old one of yours. I stood up abruptly, gripping the phone. Are you saying they used my name to sign off on insurance claims? Exactly. Your name, license number, even your employee code. I clenched my jaw and strode to my desk, opening my laptop. But I never officially worked for that clinic. I never signed any contracts. I just answered phones in high school. Then they kicked me out. I know. But it looks like they kept your old records and used them to create a phantom employee inside the billing system. I launched the medical documentation software I used to reference CMS, Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services, guidelines. The identity verification rules for claim signatories came up, crystal clear and strict. Did you find anything else? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. At least 5 hospital bills carry an electronic signature under your name. And 3 of them are flagged for duplicate diagnostic codes, which strongly suggests fraud. These invoices date back to between 2015 and 2018. I'm currently working with a private investigator. I froze. That was the exact period when I was pouring every ounce of myself into laying the foundation for Lumora. I was sleeping in my car, living off instant noodles, juggling 3 jobs. And somehow, during that time, they were using my name to siphon money from the very healthcare system I was trying to reform. Do you have evidence? I do. And I'll send everything to you. I don't want you caught in the crossfire. They used your name to legitimize a string of fraudulent activities. And I suspect there's even more. I stared out the window. The streetlight outside cast the shadows of tree branches across the hardwood floor. The room suddenly felt cold, not from the temperature, but from the weight of the truth I was hearing, finally confirming the doubts I had buried for more than a decade. Tyler continued, his voice steady now, no longer sharp like when we first met. Madison didn't know everything. She was given a role, a mask, to help the family preserve the image of a traditional clinic. But she was complicit the moment she chose to stay silent. I closed my laptop and walked slowly to my personal filing cabinet. I pulled out a small box filled with old letters and pay stubs from when I used to work part-time at the clinic. I found one with my father's handwritten signature. My name typed out on an old typewriter. Job title: Temporary Administrative Assistant. I breathed slowly, trying to keep the growing tide of emotions from overwhelming me. Do you want me to send you more? Tyler asked gently. I need everything. The invoices, the transaction logs, screenshots if you have them. Got it. I'll send them through encrypted email. Anything else? Tyler hesitated for a moment. I'm also considering notifying the authorities. I think they need to know. I didn't respond right away. My eyes drifted to the photo on the shelf. Me, Noah, and Ella on a fall camping trip. Her face glowing, arms raised, holding a red leaf like a trophy. I thought about her future. The future of a child whose mother would now have to prove her innocence in crimes she never committed. I agree, I said at last. They need to know. But let me be the one to contact them. Tyler exhaled. Thank you. I'm sorry. For believing the wrong things. You weren't the only one. We hung up. I sat in silence for a while, my thoughts still reeling. But in the dim glow of my desk lamp, I opened my email and created a new folder titled Evidence. I knew that from this moment forward, I wasn't just a healthcare executive anymore. I was a living witness to everything the family name had tried to bury. And this time I had no intention of staying quiet. I didn't speak to the media. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't call a single local reporter, even though I knew that with one word from me, the whole story would go up like a brush fire in a southern summer. But I didn't. I chose a different path, quiet, deliberate, and irreversible. After the call with Tyler, I spent 2 days compiling every personal document related to my time at Colin's family practice. My part-time employment contract from high school, detailed pay stubs, bank statements from my old account, even an email from my mother in 2014 that read, "Don't ever mention that name at the clinic again." Everything was scanned and sorted into a folder I titled Timeline of Forgery. I contacted my personal attorney, Miriam Clark, a black woman in her 60s who had built her reputation winning civil suits involving healthcare fraud. When I laid everything out, she didn't interrupt me once. Just flipped through the pages slowly, nodding as she went. Finally, she said, "Kinsley, you did this the right way. And no one, not even this system, can ignore the evidence you hold." A few days later, I received a confirmation email from the Office of Oversight at CMS, the Centers for Medicare/Medicaid Services. They informed me that the files I provided were sufficient to open a formal investigation. It came with a note of gratitude for assisting in the prevention of federal healthcare fund exploitation. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt like I had finally laid a single brick, one of many I'd need to rebuild something called justice. 3 weeks later, Colin's family practice was temporarily shut down. A printed notice on plain white paper, taped to the glass door, read, "Temporarily closed due to administrative investigation." No explanation. No apology. But the entire community knew what was happening. The news spread quickly. In a small town like Willow Grove, a family-run clinic under investigation for healthcare fraud was like thunder cracking at noon. People whispered about it in coffee shops, at church, in the grocery store. Elderly patients, people who once trusted my parents without question, were now doubting the prescriptions they'd been given, the routine checkups they couldn't remember needing. A former classmate who now worked at the city's public health office sent me a message. "People are starting to request insurance reviews going back 10 years. Some are finding duplicate charges for follow-up visits they never had." I didn't reply. I didn't interfere. I knew things were finally heading in the right direction without me having to stand in the spotlight. One afternoon in mid-month, I was at the office when Meredith walked in, her face tense. "There's a federal agent from the Office of Inspector General here to see you. They went to the Collins house this morning and want to verify the documents you submitted." I nodded. "Show them in." The agent was a middle-aged woman in a dark blue suit with a badge that read Office of Inspector General. She was polite, measured in her words, but her eyes were razor-sharp. "I'm Agent Delaney. We've confirmed signs of long-term abuse of medical billing codes going back 15 years at Collins Family Practice. We need to verify the timeline of your employment." I handed her the folder I had prepared. "This is everything I have. I only worked part-time between the ages of 16 and 18. After that, I left and had no further connection." She flipped through the documents, her expression unreadable. "Your signature was used in 36 medical records between 2015 and 2018. You weren't present for any of that, correct?" "I was living in New York at the time. Attending school part-time, working 3 jobs. I have GPS data from my Google account, rental receipts, pay stubs, and work schedules. I can send them if needed." She looked at me for a long moment, then closed the file. "I don't think you're the one who needs to worry." "I'm not worried about myself," I replied, gazing out the window. "I'm worried about the patients who trusted them." After the meeting, I returned to work. Our partnerships with Mayo Clinic and Boston General were still in clinical trial phases. Life moved forward. But every morning as I skimmed through healthcare news briefs, I saw a tiny corner headline about local clinic under investigation for Medicare billing fraud, potentially affecting hundreds of records. Once or twice I saw old photos of my parents featured in those articles, with captions like, "A family with 3 generations of medical legacy." But no one was celebrating anymore. No one was praising the proud heritage. I didn't tell Ella. She remained carefree, busy with homework, ballet classes, and weekend field trips with her parents. But no one knew. He was the first to notice the distant look in my eyes during breakfast, the slight tremble in my hands when flipping through files whenever I saw a familiar name pulled into the investigation. "You okay?" he asked, his voice as gentle as the breeze. I looked up, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "They're peeling back the layers of a lie that's been around for almost 20 years. I thought I was used to it. But watching it unravel, it still makes me sad." Noah didn't say anything. He just reached out and placed his hand on mine. Warm. Steady. No words needed. I wasn't looking to win. I just wanted the truth to be acknowledged. Not for my own pride, but for the years I stayed silent. For the patients who trusted the wrong people. And for an 8-year-old girl who deserves to grow up in a world where justice, however slow, still finds its way. That afternoon, I was in the backyard garden, wearing rubber gloves and pulling weeds around the tomato beds when Meredith stepped out from the kitchen. She held a thick, cream-colored envelope with no logo, no printed return address. Just a line of handwritten script, so neat, so careful, it made me freeze the moment I saw it. To Kinsley Harper from Madison Collins. I said nothing. Didn't rush to open it. Meredith handed me the letter and quietly went back inside, knowing I didn't need anyone intruding at that moment. I peeled off my gloves, dried my hands on my jeans, stepped into my study, closed the door, lowered the blinds, and sat at my desk with the envelope in front of me. I stared at the handwriting for a long time before finally sliding the letter out. Inside was a plain white sheet. No designs, no perfume, just simple lines that felt like they'd been written after many sleepless nights. Kinsley, I'm not writing this to defend myself. And I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just need you to know. Remember. A lot. I remember when I was 10, you stayed home that summer just to help me with multiplication and division because I couldn't keep up in advanced math. I remember the nights you saved me toast from the clinic, even though you hadn't eaten dinner yourself. I remember how you shielded my face with a towel when I cried at the clinic so no one would see me break. Then one day those memories were replaced. A whisper after dinner. A shake of Mom's head. Dad saying, "You should be careful, your sister's not stable." I didn't understand why I believed it. But I did. I believed it so much that I started avoiding you. I believed it so much that I felt at peace when you were gone. And after that, I wore your clothes, sat in your seat, accepted your scholarship, and stepped into the role of the ideal daughter, even though I knew I wasn't good enough. I never graduated college. Never managed anything. I was just a shadow built to fill the space you left behind. And I lived in that lie long enough to forget it was a lie. I'm now enrolled in a medical assistant training course at a community institute. I'm not sure I'm good at it, but I'm trying. Because for the first time I see myself, not as someone else. Just Madison. No longer the replacement. I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to know, you weren't wrong. I was. And I'm sorry. Madison. I read the letter 3 times. And each time it didn't sting more. Instead, it felt like something heavy inside my chest was slowly peeling away. Not because Madison apologized, but because she finally called herself by her own name, and mine too. I didn't write back. I didn't call. Didn't send flowers. Didn't respond. I quietly called the HR department at Lamora Health and asked them to review internship applications from community colleges. Any application from the medical assistant training program at Camden Valley Institute. Flag it for special review, I said. Do you want to specify the applicant's name, director? The assistant asked. No. I don't want her to know anyone intervened, I replied. 2 weeks later, I received a report from HR. An applicant named Madison Collins had passed the initial review. The application was simple but genuine. The cover letter was short. No bragging, no inflated achievements. Just one line that made me pause. I'm not here expecting forgiveness. I'm here hoping to learn, this time with my own hands. I didn't respond. But I printed her application, folded it neatly, and handed it to the internship coordinator myself. She needs a chance, not special treatment, I said. Don't go easy. Don't be too harsh. Just be fair. That afternoon, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the company courtyard, I saw a group of interns walking with their guide between 2 office buildings. One of them, her frame familiar, her steps steady but unhurried, was Madison. She wore the soft blue intern uniform, her hair tied back, notebook in hand. No makeup, no heels, no expensive necklace like those old family parties. She was just one of dozens of student interns walking the halls of Lamora. She didn't see me. And I didn't want her to. Because some apologies don't need to be spoken. Some wounds don't need to be revisited. And some second chances aren't meant to fix the past, but to prove that people can grow beyond the shadows of who they once were, if they're brave enough to admit they were wrong. I stood on the 2nd floor of Denver's convention center, looking down at the main showcase area where the medical booths were opening like a sprawling garden of innovation. Light streamed down through the glass ceiling, casting long shadows across display boards and familiar logos of corporations I'd once only read about 10 years ago. Lumira's booth sat at the center, steady, understated, but compelling. We didn't boast. We let data and technology speak. I watched the group of interns distribute brochures, introduce products, and jot down feedback from guests. They wore pale blue uniforms, name tags on their chests under the label Intern Program, Cohort 4. I couldn't read the names from up here. I didn't need to. Because among them I spotted Madison. She wasn't leading. She wasn't lagging. She moved with the group, unassuming, upright. She accepted a brochure from a partner table, nodded politely, jotted a few lines in her notebook. Her shoulders looked more grounded now, not the tense frame of someone guarding a facade. They were the shoulders of someone trying to be herself, slowly and sincerely. She paused in front of a booth showcasing AI in healthcare, leaned forward and asked something to the representative. When she turned back, her gaze brushed past mine. She didn't flinch. Didn't look away. She just stopped, nodded slightly, a greeting from afar that didn't ask for anything in return. I nodded back. No smile, no words. Just the quiet acknowledgement of our presence in the same space, without bitterness, without pity. I looked at Madison without feeling that pang in my chest. What I felt was something closer to peace. Not quite forgiveness. Not forgetting. Just the understanding that sometimes, in order to grow, people have to walk a long distance, even away from the ones they love. That afternoon, I returned to the main office in Boston. On my desk was a stack of files waiting for my signature. I flipped open the first page. Miller Foundation, full scholarships for students without family support. I stared at that name for a long time. Miller, my birth surname, the one erased from the family's medical records after I left home, the name I once tried to bury because I thought it carried only abandonment. But today I signed the document as if handing something whole back to the girl I used to be. How many scholarships are you planning for the first year? Miriam asked over the phone when I called to confirm. 20, I replied, gently tracing the description line with my finger. Full ride. Tuition, books, supplies, housing if needed. And each student gets a personal mentor for the first year. Sounds like you're rewriting the program you once wished you had. I smiled. It's not for me. It's for kids like I was. No one behind them, no one waiting. But still choosing to go forward. That evening I got home early. Noah was rinsing vegetables in the kitchen, and Ella was fussing around the backyard garden with a little watering can. I changed clothes, stepped out onto the porch and stood beneath the big maple tree, the one I planted during my first fall after buying this house. Look, Mom. Ella called out, waving. The carrots are sprouting. I walked over, knelt to see the tiny green shoots poking out of the soil, fragile but upright. Ella shaded her eyes with both hands, looking up at me, her gaze sparkling. Mom, is it true that some plants need to be spaced far apart to grow? Because if they're too close, their roots fight and then both get weaker. I went still for a moment. I sat beside her, gently adjusting a crooked sprout. That's right, sweetheart. Some plants need space to live. Just like people. Ella placed her hand on my shoulder. So, if people don't stay close, does that mean they hate each other? I shook my head. Not necessarily. Sometimes, distance is the best way for each person to find their own light. Some people, when they're too close, can't breathe. But with space, they finally dare to become who they are. Ella nodded. She didn't ask anything else. She went back to watering, eyes focused, her face calm, as if some quiet question inside her had finally been answered. I stayed there a while longer, gazing up at the open sky. The sun was dipping lower, casting late afternoon rays over the white wooden fence and onto the pale lavender blooms in the garden corner. I remembered the morning I left home with a worn-out suitcase. No one to send me off. No parting words. No promises. And now I have a home of my own. I have a daughter who understands that distance doesn't always mean loss. I have a foundation that helps young people stop gambling their futures on luck. I no longer need to be mentioned at family reunions I no longer attend. I don't need them to apologize in public. And I don't need anyone to say I was right. Because this quiet, this presence, me standing here today living a life that is stable, happy and mine, is the loudest answer to all the questions that once haunted me for years. Some truths don't need to be broadcast to be real. Some paths don't need an audience to be worthy. Some women don't need to stand on a podium to know they've already won. Each of us carries memories we once denied, a chapter we thought, if buried deep enough, would no longer sting. But like shoots rising from dry earth, the truth will find its light. It grows. It lives. And it reminds us that the one thing no one can fake is the strength we quietly nurtured in the dark. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved just to hold on to yourself? Have you ever received an apology that came too late? Or maybe you're the one trying to make things right. Share your thoughts in the comments below, because maybe your story is lighting someone else's path through a foggy stretch of their life. If you believe every journey of renewal deserves to be heard, hit that follow button. There are more true, heartfelt stories about family, choices, and growing up waiting just beyond the subscribe. Because sometimes all it takes is the right story at the right time to help heal an entire season of your life.